All right, folks, we are back. Gene Galin from the Chatham Journal with my favorite realtor. I don't know if I can call you a realtor. Sure. Real estate agent. Or land.
No, so not all real estate agents are realtors,
right,
but all realtors are real estate agents. It's just it's a professional organization.
All right, and are you a professional?
I try to be, yeah. I try to be.
Some of us who've known Eric for a long time sometimes have to question that. But no, the reason we're here is because the National Association of Realtors, otherwise known as NAR, there was a settlement, and it goes officially into effect August 17th. Now, there's a lot of questions about it. I don't know much about it, but why don't you tell us about what the settlement involves, and then let's talk about some of the big questions you're getting from people about this settlement, which is going into effect, August 17th, which is tomorrow.
Right. So a lot of big changes. So a little bit of background on the federal lawsuit. So it was Burnette versus Missouri, and it was a federal case. And what they were saying was that it was unfair for sellers to pay for the buyer side commission. They had a two-level agreement. So when you sign up to sell a property, you have a listing agreement. And then the agent is part of like a multiple list service, and they have an agreement that they're going to share their commissions with the buyer's agents. But what this federal law case basically said was you are beholding the seller to a second party agreement. So one of the best ways I like explaining this is if you said, hey, I'm really mad at my neighbor. My neighbor's doing something on my yard and I want to sue my neighbor. And if you went and hired an attorney and that attorney said, great, Gene, you can sue your neighbor if you want to, but you have to pay for his attorney too. And so that's what, and that's kind of what was happening in real estate. And so not everybody was cool with that because, the sellers were like, well, why do I have to pay for their agent?
Right. You mentioned the attorney situation. Let's talk about real estate situation here in Chatham County. How's that?
So there's two sides to a transaction. So there's seller representation and then there's buyer representation. And everybody, for many years, everybody's thought that it worked out best if the seller has someone representing their best interest and the buyer has somebody representing their best interest. The big to-do now is who's going to pay for that. Okay. And the way it's traditionally been done was that the listing firm, from their commissions, compensated that buyer's agent as well. Now, it's a whole new world. It's free market capitalism to the extreme, where it hasn't been decided who's going to pay that. Maybe the seller will pay that, or maybe the buyer will have to pay it directly to their agent if they want representation.
Okay, there sounds like there's a lot of maybes in there.
Right. Because you have to have with my sellers. I have to have a conversation what's in their best interest and what they should be doing. And there's some agents that are going to say, well, I'm your listing agent, just pay me, and the heck with the buyer's agent. Let the buyer pay the buyer's agent. One of the problems with this right now is it is not easy for. I mean, we've already talked about our median prices here in Chatham County.
Over 600,000.
We've already talked about higher interest rates. We've already talked about how much money people have to put down on a house. And so now what you might have to do if you're a buyer and you want representation in the transaction, which I think, that people are definitely better off having their own representation, how are you going to pay for that? So are you going to do that out of pocket, or is the seller going to help you with it? And so if you have to do it out of pocket, we can argue about what's fair compensation or whatever, but I promise you there's an amount that agents are willing to do it for, and where it becomes cost prohibitive, they just can't do it anymore. And so maybe there will be some savings there, and there might be some negotiations there, but if we said our average house here is 600,000 and your buyer's agent is saying, well, I want 2.5% or 3% for a buyer's agency agreement, that could be $18,000 on a house. And that is just, you already have loan origination, you already have attorney closing costs, you already have appraisal, you already have inspections, and now, and you have to have a certain amount down payment perhaps with your loan, and now to come up with these fees as well might be an extra burden for the buyer.
Now, you mentioned, going back to your example here, $600,000 house, buyer's agent is looking to get 2.5%. What's the seller's agent getting?
Anywhere between 2.5 and 3.5. It's well, the main thing we need to know here, the most important thing is it's all negotiable. I mean, you can negotiate it down to $500 if you want to, or 1% if you want to. And there are some people that, you know, might say, well, I want 4%, or on some of my land transactions, I'm often getting 6% or whatever, because they're very detailed land instruction. That's 6% just on the list side, and what we're paying out is negotiable as well. So the main thing that people need to know is they're all negotiable. I mean, I can't do a $50,000 piece of land for a low percentage, but if it's a $2 million piece of land, I can negotiate.
Because you got certain fixed costs.
Exactly.
You have to cover.
Exactly. Right. And so that's land, but land is outside of this agreement. It's this is just the focus on the residential right now. That's what we're focused on.
Hey, you mentioned out of pocket expense. When you mention out of pocket, is that in this new scenario, in this new world, is that paid up front, or is that paid once the deal is closed? Or am I paying, if I am a buyer, am I paying a fee up ahead?
So one of the big changes now too is, in order for me to show you a piece of property right now, I have to have a written buyer's agency agreement with you. So it used to be, you know, we call it hoping and hauling, and you came into the office and we'd drive you around, and then you would say, okay, I want to buy this, and then we would do some kind of buyer's agency agreement, and then we would sign the offer to purchase, and we'd roll from there. And it wasn't as committal, because, you know, you want to get to know the agent, you want to see whether or not they know what they're doing, you want to see if they're showing you good stuff. You know, we all have access to the same inventory, but, you know, experience and knowledge is real important. Now, in order for me to show you a property, we have to have a written buyer's agency agreement, and we have to negotiate what my compensation is going to be before we go out and start looking at it. And so, knowing that, okay, we don't know whether or not Mr. and Mrs. Seller are paying out 3%, 2.5%, 2%, 1%, or 0%. They might not be paying out anything. So it's a whole new world as far as that's concerned. In the past, it has been a lot of 2.5s and 3s, and so we all knew, and that was advertised on the MLS. So the agent would go, and they would see that they were getting paid, and that was fine. Now with this new court case and settlement, that is information that's no longer allowed to be on the MLS. If you want to show something right now, you call me up and say, hey, Eric, do you have a 220 signed? And a 220 says what amount, if any, the seller is paying out. And so the agent is going to want to see that 220 and have that in hand before they go out and show a piece of property.
All right, you just said a lot of stuff, and I just came up with a lot of questions.
I bet so. I mean, it's a game. This is one of the most fundamental shifts in real estate that's happened in the last 50 years, for sure.
Okay, you know what may happen is, after we put this video out there and write up the article, we may have to do a follow-up to it, because I'm sure we're going to have new questions, and I'm sure here on August 17th, things are going to be different come September 17th.
And I think there's going to be a little bit of this is going to shake out and rattle out in ways that we don't even know yet. So, you know, there's a lot, like, you know, everybody has a good plan, and then life hits you, and then we have to figure out what we're going to do. So I think we know how it's going to go. There are some firms that are like going ahead and putting their 220s up on their website. We're not doing that. We're not doing that at my firm. I don't think that's the best thing. I don't think it's that bad to have another conversation with an agent that's about to show my property, you know, or I have staff that can answer those questions for me. We have them on Google Drive, and we can just boom, boom, shoot them out.
It sounds like relationships are going to be a lot more important.
I think so. Yeah, exactly. And that's not a bad thing.
No,
that's not a bad thing.
It's not.
And you should probably have, you know, you definitely are going to want to gravitate to a more experienced agent that's going to help you on the buy side. I mean, when you know that you're going to actually be paying for it out of pocket, or you're going to have like a lot more value placed on who you pick and choose to be your buyer's agent.
All right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I got 7 questions.
Good.
Hopefully some of the questions you folks want answers to. All right. Let's step back. Hoping and hauling, I think you were.
Hoping and hauling.
Hoping and hauling. All right. Yeah. So right now, because it's still the 16th, if somebody, and we're not even going to think about the 17th right now. We're stuck on the 16th. It's Groundhog Day for the 16th for the next foreseeable future. Somebody walks in through that door. what's the...
As a matter of policy in our firm for the last several years, we have said that you need to have a buyer's agency agreement before you went out. So this is not a fundamental change for my real estate.
Not for your real estate.
Not for my people who work here. Now, I'm not going to say never in the history of our firm has someone gotten into a car and driven somebody around without a buyer's agency agreement. But I can tell you I have multiple sales meetings. I repeat it over and over again in our procedures manual. You're ridiculous to go out and about and show someone real estate without a written buyer's agency agreement.
Right, because basically you could be taking somebody out joyriding and...
Well, what happens is, oh, by the way, my brother's a real estate agent. He's going to be handling this, right? And so you did all the work, and at the last second, somebody comes in and takes it. But if you have that agency agreement, that can't happen to you.
So for someone who doesn't do the hoping and hauling, at least that portion of it's not going to change
for them.
Okay.
It doesn't change for the professional.
All right. Actually, that knocks out two questions. All right. You mentioned that as a seller agent, I can be anywhere from 2 to 4 down to 0%. Why, as a seller agent, would I want to offer you a opportunity at 0%?
So we talked about how the buyer pool has limited resources in the amount that they can put down. If your buyer wants representation, okay, and they only have X amount of money in their pocket that they can afford, if you as a seller are someone that is offering to compensate the buyer's agent, that your property might be more appealing to that particular buyer that wants representation, because they're not going to have to put the buyer's commission out of pocket. They're not going to have to come up with it out of pocket. The seller is offering it.
Okay, so the seller's offering to, in this scenario, seller's offering to pay for the buyer's agent's...
And that's what that 220 form that we have tells the other agent. Yeah, I have a seller that's willing to cooperate and pay a portion. Or me as the listing firm, I have a commission and I'm willing to pay you a portion of that commission to a buyer's agent.
Yeah, but as a seller agent, how am I going to live on 0%?
Well, so you can't. Well, you can't do 0%. You can't. But then you're going to be asking the buyer to pay it out of pocket.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Yeah. So it's just, where's this money coming from?
And yeah, so we're definitely gonna have a follow-up.
Sure.
To this in a month.
Because some people think that it's a savings. Okay, no, is it a savings if you don't pay it as the seller, and then the buyer has to pay the buyer's agent? There's still the totality of the funds. There's only so much blood you can get from a stone, right? So whether or not they're paying it out of pocket, or whether or not they're giving it to the seller and the seller's giving it to the buyer, is kind of a semantical argument.
All right. You mentioned shake out and rattle out.
Yeah. I think we're going to, I mean, I just had a North and South Carolina chapter meeting with a lot of other real estate professionals. It was a Zoom call right before you got here. And we're talking about it as, 2007, 2008, 2009, our real estate recession.
Right.
We call that the grand culling because we lost a lot of agents. We probably lost 30%. There's the expectation come February, we're probably going to lose between 10 and 20% of the agents, because this is going to be such a fundamental paradigm shift in how we do real estate that I don't like. We have agents that do, like, the average agent does 4 or 5 deals a year. Right. And so those people that are doing a few deals a year probably won't be able to survive this. You're going to have to have a business plan. You're going to have buyer consultations. You're going to have to be able to explain what your fees are and why you charge that. And we're going to be a lot more accountable, which I don't think is a bad thing.
So pretty much it's going to, you're not going to see very many part-time agents unless they're...
I can't imagine it. I mean, maybe so, but not as many as we've had in the past, for sure. And we really don't see a whole lot of part-time agents now. There are people that say they're in it full-time, but to me, they're in it part-time.
Right. No, we're not going there in that conversation. All right. We talked about shake out and rattle out, but let me ask you this. Then the question is, what does this mean for a new agent or somebody who wants to break into the industry?
I think sometimes as older agents, we develop bad habits. So actually the new agents might be...
What are your bad habits?
My bad habits is I really don't work with a whole lot of buyers. I'm mostly a selling agent. because I have enough book of business and I have a bunch of listings, whatever. I'm not a good, there's a difference between marketing and showing a property and getting that information out and giving good seller representation versus bird dogging. Like, you tell me this is what you want, now I have to go out and find it. I'm not as good as that. A seasoned agent should probably be 70% listing side and 30% buyer side. That's like what the pros are. I'm like 95-5. I mean, I only work with buyers if they're like really, really like repeat clients and they insist on me doing buyers.
And you get a lot of word of mouth.
Yeah, and I'm also a different niche or whatever. Like, what we're talking about is a big change in the residential market. I'm primarily a land broker, and so we're used to either the buyer paying us directly or having some kind of other commission arrangement.
What other questions? You mentioned before we started that you've been getting a lot of phone calls. I mean, you put out a bunch of YouTube videos as well.
Sure.
Don't know if he still found Sasquatch. But what are some of the other questions that you're getting from folks that are calling you up from, I guess, all over the country?
I'm getting calls from a lot of real estate agents. Unfortunately, some of the things I'm seeing is people are attaching the 220 to the offer to purchase. That's a big no-no. It's an if A, then B, if B, then C situation. So you have to have your commission agreement in place before you make an offer.
Now, let me ask you a question. You said the 220s. That's the seller's responsibility. If somebody were to walk in, what kind of agreement do you sign with them? Do you also sign the 220, or is it a different form?
I can either sign the 220 or the seller can sign the 220. The 220 is the disclosure to the buyer's agent what, if any, the seller is paying to the buyer's agent as a commission.
Okay, but if somebody comes in through the door and wants to be a buyer, and you haven't found that,
then they have an agency agreement.
Okay,
and you can have an exclusive or a non-exclusive. I don't want to get into all that.
No, we're not going to get into it.
Right,
on this.
But what that means is, Mr. Andrews, I have hired you as my agent, and for X amount of time, for X amount of geographic area, I'm going to hire your services to find me a piece of real estate. And if I find suitable real estate for which I make an offer, contract, and close on, I'm going to pay you X percentage.
Gotcha. All right. So that's what you've been doing with your agency agreement, and that's what you'll continue to do come effective tomorrow. Okay.
No changes.
So that part's no changes.
Right.
The 220, is that a totally new pool?
Well, yeah, because it used to be in the past that someone was, it was all out there on the MLS what they were paying out.
Okay.
And now there's an extra step in finding that out. You have to contact the seller, the listing firm, or the seller's agent to figure out what you're being paid, if anything.
You mentioned the buyer pool. Is this going to affect the buyer pool? Because we mentioned that housing here, we're looking at an average, one of the highest averages here in the state of 600,000. What's that mean for?
Yeah, I mean, I guess if you're in that 600 to 800,000 range, okay, and if you want to hire someone as a buyer's rep, maybe $15,000 or $18,000 isn't a huge deal to you. But if you're trying to find something in that $300,000 to $400,000 range, okay, and now we're talking $10,000 or $12,000, you just might not have that saved up as your down payment and everything. And so that's probably one of the sad things is first-time home buyers and people that are just entering the real estate market are probably the ones that need the representation the most. I think everybody needs representation, but these are certainly the ones that need the representation the most, and they might be the least likely to afford it.
So let's take that $10,000 figure. So that $10,000 figure effective August 12th was probably going to come out of maybe the down payment you had towards a new home.
Right. Now, again, I have to overtly emphasize these fees are all negotiable. And so, you say, okay, well, I think $15,000 is way too much. You're opening up a door for me. You're writing up an offer for me. You're helping me through the transaction and everything. I'm going to do it for $10,000. Are there going to be people out there that do it for $10,000? Sure. I'm going to do it for $5,000. Okay, there's probably going to be people out there that will do it for $5,000. I'm going to do it for $1,500. Well, what do you think you're going to get for an agent that is willing to spend that much time and take you through the entire transaction? I can't see it being done for that. So there is going to be some downward pressure in negotiation, but I don't, when you see it all over the nightly news, buyers are going to potentially save thousands or whatever. they're going to save thousands if they wish to forego representation. And we can get in an argument of whether or not, is an agent worth this or whatever. I'm fine with those kinds. And, there are times where, you have to question, on $1 million house, should that person really get paid $30,000 or whatever? Some would argue yes, some would argue no, whatever. I can understand where some people have felt as though the fees have gotten a little outrageous or whatever, but it's still a service where you're better off having representation for sure. And we have to put a value on that. I'm a big advocate of free market capitalism. I like that we can negotiate these things. Everybody has to put a value on what they do. I put a value on what I do. If you don't think it's worth it, you can go on to someone else. I'm okay with that.